unpacking today's headlines. This is Souls and Liberty in Depth.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In Depth, the production of Souls and Liberty brought to you in partnership with MyPillow.com. America has delivered the presidency, the Senate, and the House into the hands of the GOP. And yet a key question remains. What level of support will Trump receive from Republicans in Congress once his second term gets underway? More on the ongoing shakeup in D.C. in a moment, but first.
So the pro-life position actually won that. That is huge, and that is a template of how to handle this in the future. And there has to be these types of movements here in these states that allow initiatives in this next election.
The numbers keep rolling in as votes continue to be counted out west. Joining us today to talk about all this is political guru Jim Ellis. I'm your host, Stephen Wynn, coming to you from Kansas City. Jim, welcome. Let's get started by looking at the House. Where do things stand there for Republicans now?
Well, Stephen, it's getting very close, and frankly, President Trump has not made it any easier for the House leadership by choosing so many members from the House for administration appointments. It's getting very close to what I'm calling political gimbal lock, because the margin's very, very small. You have 4 outstanding races now that have not been completed. 3 of those are in California and the other in Alaska. And the Republicans right now are ahead in 3 of the 4, but one of them, Congresswoman Michelle Steele in Orange County, is hanging by a thread. She was only 349 votes ahead at this point. They still have more votes to count, and I'm afraid that's not looking very good for her. Congressman John Duarte in the Modesto area of California, he is looking pretty good, but that's not called as yet. He's almost 4,000 votes ahead. And the way that district operates, he should break even with the outstanding votes, or pretty close. And that should reelect him. But it's, again, nothing's for sure. The Democrats have another seat in Fresno there that they have not gotten called, but likely will with Congressman Jim Costa, the Democrat from Fresno. He's ahead by about 5,000 votes, and that's probably going to be enough for him to hang on to his seat. And in Alaska, you have Congresswoman Mary Peltola. Now, remember, she won that seat because of that ranked choice idiotic system they have up there, which Stephen, they may be getting rid of. When the final votes come in, there is a motion or a ballot proposition to repeal that top 4 jungle primary system they have that then leads to this ranked choice voter system where you rank the people on the ballot as opposed to voting for one. And it really helps the Democrats in Republican states. That's the idea of it, sort of. And Alaska is a little bit different, but the top 4 go to the general election. And here's the situation, and that may go away. I think the people look like they're repealing it, but that's not done. However, it will be in effect for this election. So you have Congresswoman Mary Peltola, who beat Sarah Palin for that seat after Congressman Don Young passed away. And she's hung on by this ranked choice fake system. So then you have now Nick Begich III. This is kind of an interesting story because his grandfather was a Democratic congressman from Alaska, Nick Begich. In 1972 was killed in a plane crash with the House Majority Leader at the time. And they were out visiting the constituency, and they went down in a plane. Later on, Nick Begich's son, Mark Begich, gets elected to the U.S. Senate as a Democrat. Both of them are Democrats. Nick Begich III, however, a businessman who is his uncle was the Democratic U.S. Senator, beat Ted Stevens, and then lost the seat to the current Senator, Republican Dan Sullivan. Nick Begich III is actually a Republican. And so he has the family name, but not the family political heritage. And so he is ahead of Congresswoman Peltola at this point. It looks like he will win that. I don't think there's any doubt he comes in first place when finally all these votes from the hinterlands get counted. But it probably isn't going to be at 50. He's going to be in the 49 range. So it goes to the ranked choice system. So who knows? He probably wins. But the Republican majority now is to the point where they got to have all these come through here, or we're close to like a 218, 217 House if they don't. So I think Begich does win. That would put the Republicans at 220. I think that Congressman Duarte wins in Modesto, California. That would put them at 221. I'm afraid Congresswoman Steele doesn't make it, and they end up at 221. But he's already nominated 3 Republicans from the House for higher administration positions. And so this is going to be a problem when these seats become vacant, because you're down to the bare minimum at that point.
Yeah.
And this is like, Stephen, the best case scenario now. And this is an unforced error.
Yeah. So basically, 2 weeks after the election, it's still a nail biter.
It's still a nail biter. We're only talking about a few thousand votes here at the end of the day. It isn't. I mean, Republicans should hold the majority, but remember, these 3 members going to be leaving. So Congressman Waltz from Florida, he has been appointed National Security Advisor. He does not need Senate confirmation. So on January 20th, he can take office along with Trump. So therefore, he would resign his seat in the House at that time. So Governor DeSantis then can call that special election. He may be able to call it ahead of time, since it's now clear that these people are out. So there's not going to be much of a problem in Florida, particularly if DeSantis can call a quick election. And that's a safe seat. In fact, that seat was Governor DeSantis' House seat when he was in the House. So he knows this district very well, and he will he'll call the special election to replace Waltz. Now, the other problem is you've got with Matt Gaetz now. He has been nominated as Attorney General. This is a wild appointment, and frankly, Stephen, I don't see any way he gets confirmed. Okay. So, but he's already resigned from the House. And one reason apparently that has happened is because the Ethics Committee in the House was coming out with a report on him about some sexual situations with underage girls. Him leaving the House eliminates that problem, because the Ethics Committee no longer has jurisdiction. Wow. Now, because he's not a member of Congress. Now, that report, well, they say, well, we can't release a report. It'll come out, believe me. If the Democrats have access to this, so this is going to come out. And so that's going to kill Gaetz in the Senate confirmation. So I'm not sure what they're thinking here on this one. Right. But he is out. Now, here's the interesting angle. He's resigned from the House now. That's the current term that ends in January. He's been elected to another term beginning January 3rd. Now, he says his intent is not to take the seat on swearing-in day, January 3rd, but he still could. So there's a lot of drama that's going to unfold with that one. That is the Pensacola, Florida seat. That is a safe Republican seat. It's not a question they would hold it. It's a question of when can you have the special election to fill that seat with another member. The bigger problem is up in New York. So you got Elise Stefanik, who has been appointed UN ambassador. She's a very good appointment, and her seat should be safely Republican. But this seat has gone to special election before, and the Republicans blew it. So they're not beyond blowing it again. And the other problem you've got that Democratic governor, Kathy Hochul, there. Yeah. And she can call the special election. Now, that law is kind of ambiguous on special elections. And when Governor Cuomo was in office, he was able to keep a Republican seat open for like a whole year by not calling the election. And I wouldn't be surprised if she pulls that game too. So there's a chance that seat stays open for most of the year, because it would help the Democrats not to have another Republican member. So there's a lot of intrigue here with the House majority that really we shouldn't have to deal with. And this causes Speaker Johnson a lot of trouble here. Yeah. Because on every vote now for the Trump agenda, every vote, they're going to have everybody online, everybody in the House, every Republican, because you can't count on any Democrats. They're robots. Right. They'll vote with whatever the leadership has. I don't care what they say on the campaign trail about them being, I'm bipartisan. No, you're not. Right. And you're a robot, and you vote exactly the way the leadership tells you. Now, maybe because the election really was pretty overwhelming, and they're shell-shocked. Maybe you can get a couple of crossovers here from new members. Who knows? Probably not, is my guess. So it makes it very difficult. And Trump has caused this problem himself, really, because you just can't go into these elections with not having no margin, and that's pretty much where they are. And this is not to say, and what happens if somebody gets sick? What happens if somebody's plane gets delayed? What happens? I mean, that's the problem now. They've got such a small margin, very likely, that they have no margin for error. And so I'm not saying that any of these appointments, maybe Gates is a bit of an odd appointment, but Stefanik and Waltz, they're great appointments. And they will do great in these positions, but it does endanger the situation in the House. And therefore, it endangers the Trump majority and the Trump agenda.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of a long-winded answer to say that it's not clear.
Right. Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, we shrug and wait, I guess, right?
Probably we have to wait till around November 20th. The Alaska unofficial results must be in by November 20th. Then you have the California, however, the deadline isn't until December 13th on certification. Every state has a certification deadline of their elections. That's the day they have to report to Congress and to their state capital who has won the elections. So that the latest in the country is December 13th. That's California, because they take forever to count the ballots there. And so we may not know until in December here, a couple of these seats.
Okay. All right. Well, it'll be fascinating to see how it all shakes out. All right. When we come back, brace yourself. The left is mobilizing.
The establishment has tried to assassinate President Trump twice, but we can't really be shocked that those who slaughter 1 million unborn babies each year would try to kill one more human being who stands in the way of their diabolical agenda. Trump, like every one of us, including all of us at Souls and Liberty, is a sinner. But like all of us, he is in the fight and fighting for all of us to get one more chance, maybe a last chance, to save the republic. We must hang together, or as Benjamin Franklin said, we shall hang separately. And maybe far sooner than many imagine, because communists take over and always persecute Christians and Catholics in particular. Let us help you fight these forces of evil. Become a monthly supporter today so we can continue giving you the information, the tools of our faith, and the support network you need to go out and save souls and save our nation. Join our merry band of happy warriors and click below to get into the fight. We need you, we need each other. Join the resistance. Become a monthly donor today.
All right, Jim, you've given us a very thorough look at the situation in the House, and including what could be some difficulties that Trump might encounter in the nomination process here. Can you give us an update on the Senate? For example, I know that just recently the race between McCormick and Casey, a recount has been ordered of that. What might that yield?
The Pennsylvania Senate's the only one uncalled now. So the Senate now sits at 52 to 47 and really 53 with the Pennsylvania situation. So David McCormick is the Republican nominee for Senate. And he has been projected, actually the Associated Press even projected him the winner. He is ahead by just under 30,000 votes statewide. So Senator Bob Casey, now election denier, by the way. Now he is an election denier here. And so the Secretary of the Commonwealth, who is the Secretary of State, most places would have that as a Secretary of State, the elections manager. Well, guess where he's from? Guess what his background is, because he was appointed by the Democrat governor. Well, he spent 10 years on the Philadelphia Elections Board. So that gives you an idea of where things are going. Under Pennsylvania law, that if an election falls within 0.5% between the top two finishers, then there must be there is a mandatory recount that the state pays for. And the Secretary of State's already ordered that. It was a curious ruling, I thought, because he's saying to the the counties that aren't complete, by the way. He says you have to have your numbers in by November 20th, and then the recount's going to start on November 20th. Well, if all the numbers aren't fully in yet, how does he know they're within a half a point?
Yeah.
So okay, that's alarm bell number one. Then they'll go to a recount, and he's ordered that the count starts November 20th and must be completed by November 26th, with the report coming to the state on November 27th. So this is almost 30,000 votes here. That's a lot of votes to overcome.
Right.
And so I'm not, is there going to be something funny happening here? Well, you got to watch Philadelphia, of course, but that's a lot. That's a lot of votes. So the last time we had a major recount in a Senate race was back in 2008 in Minnesota. And that was Senator Norm Coleman, a Republican, and Al Franken, you remember, who was from Saturday Night Live feature, and he supposedly wins this Senate race in Minnesota, and then had to resign, due to that sexual harassment thing later on. But what happened there in 2008, that took until July of the following year to resolve itself. And Coleman, the Republican, was certified the official winner, but that wasn't good enough. And they continued to fight that all the way and had favorable courts. And here's the good news for McCormick. The Senate is the final arbiter on who gets seated, not the courts. So the Republicans having the majority here is a big, big help to McCormick, because if they pull something there in Pennsylvania, which they're not beyond, that's an awful lot of votes, then they could happen. Now, back in Minnesota, so I went back and looked, I said, what was the original count there? How many were they able to flip? Because this is one where they do the typical thing with all of a sudden at the end of June, they find a bunch of ballots in somebody's car, and the judge allows it. And it's just the right number to put Franken over the top. And that's how he wins after 6 months. So, but I went back and looked at the original count there. I said, what was the original count that allowed them to do it? And it wasn't 30,000. It was like 300.
Okay.
So that's why they were able to keep it that long. So I don't think they can flip 30,000 votes. I think McCormick wins this in the end, and even a recount isn't likely to. I don't think they made 30,000 mistakes on the recount. That's what we're talking.
Right. Okay.
But it's the last straw. It's the last straw that they have. So election denier Casey is working behind the scenes to force this recount. So we'll see what happens. But at the end of the day, the Senate itself, this Republican majority, will decide this at the end. So if they pull something, it won't fly.
Okay. All right. Very good. That's very interesting. So you've outlined Democratic machinations. We've seen those certainly in the past. Looking forward, we last week we saw that Democrats were stunned and kind of immobilized for a few days following Trump's reelection. They just, amazed by the size and scope of it. But that is changing now. They're starting to organize. We've seen Governor Gavin Newsom of California coming out saying his state is going to be the epicenter of anti-Trump resistance. And then earlier this week we saw Congressman Wiley Nickel of North Carolina, Democrat, coming out saying that Democrats should form a shadow cabinet to combat Trump. So what sort of Democratic counterstrikes do you think we're going to see moving forward, and will they be successful?
Well, I don't think they'll be successful as long as the numbers hold. And Wiley Nickel, by the way, from North Carolina, he's out. He didn't even run again because of the redistricting. And so now he's going to run for the Senate. So that's a grandstand move on his part. And they can do whatever they want. And Gavin Newsom wants to Trump-proof California. Well, maybe they'll secede. And people say, well, that can't happen. You have to have a vote in the legislature and a vote in Congress. I'm not sure you couldn't get a vote in Congress to okay them to secede. It would certainly be in the Republicans' interest for them to secede. So,
right.
Yeah, I think a lot of this is grandstanding, but a lot of it is how this is handled within the House and how they can move things through. I would expect the first quarter to be very active in Congress to pass as much of this as they can. I think the confirmation process for most of these appointments will be pretty smooth, except for Gates. There is some talk that maybe he put gates up so they could throw somebody to the wolves and then everybody else gets through. I mean, that might happen. They think they have some problems with Hegseth because of his experience level for Defense Department. Some of the senators may not think he's qualified. So yeah, the confirmations are going to be interesting, and we'll see what happens there. But we'll see confirmations. I think we'll see now that they're talking about running a budget for next year before this Congress ends, and that would be a good idea so they could hit the ground running. The continuing resolution type thing, which they could do in advance. And so I think they're going to try that in the House. I'm not sure the Senate will go along with it because Schumer's still there until January 3rd. So, but if they do that first, then they've got the framework, and then they can go immediately into the tax legislation. I think they're going to do that fast. Remember, the Trump tax cuts expire in 2025. And that, if Congress doesn't extend them, that is going to be the largest tax increase in American history. Now, I'm surprised that wasn't a bigger part of the campaign. Yeah. But they ought to be able to get that done, to extend those, and because that is a key part of what Trump wants to do to regenerate the economy. And I would expect them immediately on some executive orders to free up the energy industry in terms of the regulations that bind them, and also maybe reinstalling, giving them the okay to reinstall that Keystone pipeline. There's lots of things Trump could do early to free the energy sector, and that's what's going to get the country rolling again.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so looking forward to that. That's key. We've got to get our mojo back in that and many other areas. All right, Jim, thank you very much for your analysis there. When we come back, we'll take a look at the impact the Catholic vote had last week. Stay with us.
Because of your overwhelming support, our $14.88 MyPillow has been one of the biggest sales in MyPillow history. I couldn't think of a better way to say thank you than to extend our wholesale pricing through Christmas. Get a classic standard MyPillow for only $14.88. Upgrade to a queen size, just $18.88. King size, only $1 more. Get my body pillows for only $29.88. And ready? Multi-use MyPillows, only $9.88. It's perfect time to stock up for Christmas gifts for everyone on your list. Go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of our wholesale pricing. Including my classic standard MyPillows, only $14.88. But that's not all. I'm so confident you're going to love our classic MyPillows that I'm going to extend my 60-day money-back guarantee until March 1st, 2025. Plus, orders over $75 ship absolutely free.
All right, Jim, a question about the Catholic impact on last week's election. I know that Catholics went for Trump over Harris by a fairly comfortable margin, but can you dive a little deeper and explain to us the overall impact of Catholic voters on this year's decision?
I think it was huge, and we'll see real numbers later on when the election results become final. A lot of these exit polls aren't particularly accurate. We'll get better data as the year progresses. But I think it's going to show a very strong vote for Trump among Catholics, much better than in the past for a Republican candidate. And it was a big factor. I think that's one of the reasons, and we talked about this many times on the show, that the Catholic vote moving towards Trump is one of the reasons I think you saw a move among the Hispanic community to Trump as well, particularly among Hispanic men. Now, the early exit information suggests that maybe is half or maybe even a little bit more, maybe a majority of Hispanic men may have voted for Trump. And I think a lot of that we'll see is Catholic Hispanics coming to vote for Trump for a lot of the social issues and certainly the economic issues. So I think the Catholic vote was huge. This is a great opportunity to begin to build more within the Catholic community for Christian principles and Catholic teaching. So it is. I think it's a great opportunity and one that cannot be missed. This has to be built upon greater communication within the churches and greater understanding for the people as to where these candidates stand on issues. I think the Catholic vote had a large impact on some of these propositions. You know, there were 10 abortion propositions on the ballots in 10 states. And the pro-life community didn't do anything, to tell you the truth. I mean, they just sort of stood aside. They got totally outspent. Yep. The money coming in to promote abortion was just overwhelming. The Democrats were running that as a single issue campaign in the House races. Again, Republicans don't answer, and you have a predictable result when that happens. But that, in and of itself, of the 10, the pro-life side still won 3 of those 10 issues with not much of an effort. In Florida, the only reason they won in Florida is because on a Florida initiative, you need 60% to pass it, and that abortion got 57. Right. So they won that. They didn't get a majority by any stretch, but they still won that one because they didn't get to 60, the yes vote. South Dakota was an outright win. Nebraska was the most interesting one, and this is sort of the template for how things have to move forward here on initiatives and just in terms of how to battle this on the question of abortion. So they actually had 2 initiatives on the Nebraska ballot. One was a no restriction on abortion, and one was a 6-month ban. And I believe it was 6 months. So there was the restriction initiative and the no restriction on abortion initiative. That means no parental consent. It means, abortion up to birth, live birth abortion. That's what that means. So the courts before the election ruled, well, we have competing initiatives here. So the one that gets the larger number of votes will be the one that's recognized. The one with the restriction, so the pro-life position actually won that. That is huge, and that is a template of how to handle this in the future. And there has to be these types of movements here in these states that allow initiatives in this next election. We need to qualify these types of ballot initiatives that will put restrictions on this, not enshrine the so-called right to abortion in state constitutions.
Up to birth.
Like these other states did. Yeah. But then begin to chip away at what can be allowed and what isn't. And so that's how you have to start. I mean, it's been a big setback, but the pro-life community's got to start fighting back. And the Nebraska results, with very little opposition money spent, which is an even better test, it came out pretty well. And we've got to use what happened in Nebraska as a template for moving forward. But they have to move forward.
Right. All right. Yeah, I think you've outlined that very well. The Republicans and Catholics, we've got our work cut out for us as we move ahead over the next couple of years, and we want to make sure that this is not a one and done sort of vote. We want to continue the MAGA revolution and get it done. All right, Jim. Thank you very much for joining us. Excellent and fascinating insights and discussion as always. And to our viewers, thank you as well for joining us on In Depth. God bless you.